Hello everyone, my name is Juan Medina, Ansible Specialist Adoption Architect in Red Hat. Today I want to bring to you the Ansible Ecosystem. This is going to be a quick tour through all the tools that are part of the Ansible Ecosystem. The idea is not to have a deep dive, but it's more like a quick and dirty guide to the essential tools and the things that you can do. Get familiar with the terminology and the things that you need to start building a professional Ansible project. Like any project, it has to start with a good foundation. A good foundation basically means having good version control and a standardized structure, a file structure. Now, in most cases, when people start developing Ansible, they start by creating a simple project. Let's just create a directory. And within this project, they start coding. They jump immediately into creating a playbook and kind of like connecting the playbook and testing it out. And that's usually how it goes. Now, if we want to improve that process, ideally, we should have a Git repository for this. We can either start on our Git website called GitHub or GitLab or whatever it might be. Or we can just initialize it right here. So let me do a Git. I'm going to copy the command so we don't have to type it all down. That's just initializing and saying that my main branch is going to be the main branch. That's going to be my default branch. Now I'm going to initialize the project, and of course this is still an empty project. If we look at the GitHub files, we now have a Git configuration, but we can just ignore that for the moment. Now that we have our initial project, we need to start building the artifacts and the structures for whatever is that solution that we want to build. So let's say that we want to create just a playbook. In most scenarios, we just start by doing a simple YAML definition file, maybe just being main.yaml, and start coding, start adding things to it. Now, I want to bring to you that there is an Ansible tool called the Ansible Creator. The Ansible Creator, if we double tap, it gives you two main options. One is to add artifacts to an already existent project, and the other is to initialize artifacts into a new project. So if I'm initializing, I'm going to double tap that as well. You can see that it allows you to either create a collection, an execution environment, or maybe just a playbook. Whatever the case might be, it will force you in a very opinionated way. It will force you to make use of good practices. So if I want to create a playbook and I just hit enter, it will tell me that it requires a name. If I want to just give it a name, let's just say main, or yeah, let's just call it main. It will say that the name needs to have a valid collection format, meaning that it requires a namespace or an organization and a name. A namespace can be just a user, your username on Galaxy, your username on your organization, or even the organization name or your department or whatever the case might be. So let's say that in this case this is for the network team, and the playbook that I will be working on is just a playbook to, I don't know, let's say it work on firewalls, right? So when I do that, oh, if I put everything down, right? So network firewalls, there you go. It automatically creates a structure for me. It's not just a file. If I look at the tree of everything that has been created, you can see that a lot of things were created. So this is, once again, very opinionated, and it's giving you the basic configurations to a good starting point, so to speak. So if you notice, it has an Ansible configuration. Let's see how that Ansible configuration looks like. And it has some of the basics. It points already to your inventory directory. It tells you that ideally you should have a remote user, a become a method, and etc. etc. So it's giving you some of the basics that you need for that configuration. At the same time, if you are working with execution environments and you're using the Ansible Navigator, which we'll explore later in this video, it also presents some of the options for configuration of the Ansible Navigator, right? So those are some of the things that you will see there. At the same time, if you're going to be using collections, it already has the collections directory. If you're going to be using an inventory directory, already has the inventory directory with group bars and host bars. And it presents to you a couple of playbooks, example playbooks. One is for Linux, another is for network, and the site main YAML. If I look at the site main YAML file, you will notice that it's calling the role for the network firewalls run. Now, what if instead of creating a playbook, let me get rid of everything. I'm gonna clean the directory. What if instead of a playbook, what we want to create is a collection? Then we will use the same command, but we will initialize a collection. We provide the organization name or the namespace and the name of the collection. So when we hit enter, it's just warning about some of the hidden files like the git ignore. And now if we look at the tree, we can see that this has also, in a very opinionated way, generated a whole file structure. But this already has your definition files, your documentation files, your Galaxy file, and all the structure required for your collection. Now, if you notice, among the things that are part of your collection is the roles directory, and it gives you one role as an example, which is the run role, and also some other artifacts for this specific collection. Now, what if you want to add other roles? Now, the idea of having this very opinionated structure is not to use it as is, but to take it as a reference. It is easier just to remove the things that are unnecessary, that have a clear empty space, and start building up as we go. To me, at least, it's easier just to say, this is I don't need it today, I'm gonna just take it off and build from there. Now, from here, let's say that I want to create a new role. We will use the Ansible creator, but instead of using the init, we will use the add. We're adding our new resource. The resource is a role, and the name of that role will be HTTPD. So when we add that, we can look at the tree in our roles directory. We can see that besides the example run, now we have an HTTPD role created. Just as we did with that, we can also, I'm gonna clear everything once again. What if instead we just want to create an execution environment? Well, we can say Ansible creator initialize or init, and double tap, and you can see there is the execution environment. And if I just hit enter, it will tell me, well, you need to give it a name, right? So let's say this execution environment is called new EE. Now I have a new execution environment created. If I run the tree, you can see that the new EE folder has been created, and an execution environment definition is in it. Now that is just another thing. What if we want to work with development containers? We can also add a new resource to our project and say Ansible creator add. I'm going to double tap that, a resource. I will double tap that, and we can see there that there is the option to add a dev container. So if I do that and I tree my hidden files, you can see that at the very top we have a new directory called the .deb container, which gives you the definition for a deb container, and it gives you examples if you want to run using Docker or if you want to run using Podman. And I believe that this definition uses Podman by default, but it gives you all the requirements, basic requirements to set up your deb container that again you can take and use as reference. Now, one of the things that is necessary for us to test, in this scenario I have two systems. This system, which is just a Linux server that I'm using as a workstation, and then I have another Linux server which I call Piggy that I'm using as the managed node. Let me change the color of this one so we can differentiate. So in the Piggy, this is going to be the client we are modifying, and this is the one that we're using to run our playbooks. One of the things that we need is to generate an SSH key, which we can do by running a command something like this. I'm not going to run it because I already have it, but that basically generates a new SSH key with no password. Now, if you want to have it with a password, that's totally fine. Then we just need to make sure that this is registered into our SSH agent. Again, I'm not going to do it. And finally, we just need to make sure that this SSH key from what is going to be our control system, or in this case our workstation, where we will be launching our playbooks, has remote access, SSH access to the remote systems. So that's why we run this. Now, again, this will fail because I already have the key in the remote system, but all we need to make sure is that I'm able to execute commands without being asked for a password. That's ideal. It's convenient. Now, the first tool we will explore from the Ansible ecosystem, besides the Ansible creator, is the Ansible tool itself, what we're known as the Ansible core. It doesn't need any playbook. It can literally run commands directly against as many systems as you want. So let's say that we say just Ansible. We use an inventory, and because we don't have any inventory, let's just say that we are targeting the Piggy system. I'm going to add a comma because that helps us to avoid having some warnings at the end. And then because we are connecting to a system in which we are the user J Medina R, in my case, and in the remote system is the exact same user, it's not the root user, that user needs to have privilege escalations. Now, if I go to the remote system, you can see, I'm going to sudo, you can see that this user has access to root without a password. It's ideal to have it that way. It's convenient because that way you're not going to be asked for password every single time. And if you look at my sudoers configuration, you can see that that's the only line that I have included, that the user J Medinar has access to all system, all places, all commands without password. That is what going to allow me to run playbooks in that remote system. Now let's say that I want to test. Testing can be done by running the module ping, and I will just test it that way. Now if you notice, it's saying ping pong, and that's just the Pythonized way of saying I was able to connect and I'm able to reach this remote system. Now imagine that I want to create a user in the remote system. Now I will say Ansible, use the inventory, let's target the Piggy system. I'm gonna need to ask for the become password, that is ask me for the root or the user password so it can sudo if that was necessary. and I will also say become, right? Because it needs to know that it has the capability of becoming. Now, becoming what? Becoming the root user. So it needs to know that in the remote system, it has the capability of becoming root by using sudo. Now the module that I will run, and I'm going to use all long arguments. So it's dash dash module is the same as the dash m, and I will use the fully qualified module name, which is the Ansible that built in user. And let me continue in the next line. I will pass some arguments. So if you notice, do dash a, and this takes a couple of arguments that are requirements. So let's just say this is the user. Let's call it user 1 or user A, and the other argument that we will pass is the state, which has to be a present, and that's it. So it's asking me for the become password. I'm going to give it a password, and now this user has been created. Now, because I have that sudo configuration in the remote system, I honestly don't need the become password because it's a no password, but I do need the become. It still needs to know that it's capable of becoming the root user. Now let's test it doing the user B, and we can see that the user B has created. And if we go to the remote system and we tell for the last two lines of the etc pal.wd, we can see that both users have been created. All right, now as of now, we executed these commands by passing the inventory on its own. Now, what if we want to set up an inventory file? An inventory file is what tells Ansible what's gonna be our target system, the machines that we want to manage. An inventory file could be something as simple as a file. So let's just make a file, call it host, and it doesn't have to have an extension. It could be an INI or a YAML or a JSON, depending on the format, but it doesn't need to. So let's say one of our system is Piggy. Let's say that the other system is Kermit, maybe Elmo, Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. So those are, in this particular case, just human recognizable names that we are giving to our remote systems. These are names that we can easily remember, but at the same time, if for whatever reason they are not solvable by our DNS or our host table, our etc host file, we can always set variables within the inventory itself. We can say, for example, Ansible underscore host equals 127, 129, whatever, right? XXXX. That's just setting up, this is the specific system that you need to reach. We can also say things like Ansible port in case that the port is different to the regular port 22. We can set a different port. But then at the same time, we can set any other variables that we consider necessary. So, for example, we can say a variable Superman can fly, which is true, and that sets that this is something, right? It's just a variable. Now, at the same time, we can start grouping things around. So if we create a group, let's just say this is a group of characters in which we will have Piggy, we will have Elmo, and we will have Kermit, right? We maybe have another group of superheroes, in which we'll have a Superman, Spider-Man, and Batman. And we can have variables for groups. So if we say for the superheroes vars, this will set a section for variables for the group of superheroes. So we'll say, are they strong? We'll say it's true. Can they fly? We'll say is false. Now, one thing you should know is that variables have certain definitions, and they are loaded at different moments during the execution. Group variables, for example, are loaded first. Therefore, all the superheroes will be marked as false. They cannot fly. But then host variables, which is directly assigned to the host, are loaded next. Will basically means that they will override whatever was set in the group variable. So Superman will be first marked as cannot fly, but then it will be marked as it does, is the only of the superheroes in the list that can fly. So it can fly, yes, it's true. Now this is just one way of creating an inventory. It's very convenient because it's just one file, but what happens is we start having too many variables, too many systems, too many hosts. The controlling it into a single file becomes a little bit more complicated. So let's step out of this file, clear our project, and let's create a new inventory directory. I'm going to make an inventory directory, and within that inventory directory I can start creating multiple things. I can do host vars directory and group vars directory. Now I can also create files and directories within the directories per host. So if I want to start creating new host, I will do a new file called host. I will add my Piggy system, and now within the host vars I will make a new directory called Piggy, and now inside of that directory I can start making files. I can say host vars for the Piggy system. Let's set the it's a main .yaml, and here we can start creating some variables. We can say variable 1 equals true, can fly equals false, etc, etc. Right? It's just a YAML definition, but if we wanted to create others, we can do that as well. And we can set as many files as we want and make sense. Have a specific file for HTTP variables, and a specific file for HA proxy variables, and a specific file for MySQL, and so on and so on and so on. We don't need to have them all within a single file. Same applies for the group variables. If I do group vars and I create a group called superheroes, this is a directory. Could be a file or could be a directory. So this time let's make it a directory. Superheroes. There you go. And then we can create within the superheroes again vars host.yaml or whatever the name you want, they will all be loaded as part of the superheroes group. So here we can say can fly equals false, right? So it applies the same concept, it just gives you more flexibility to control the variables and the host and the groups as they start growing exponentially. A good tip to consider is keep in mind that a host, a system, can be member of many groups. It doesn't have to be member of just one. So consider creating groups with multiple categories. Have groups based on the utilization, based on the systems that they're running, the environment that they're running, if it is production, if it's development, the geographical location, if it's in one city or maybe another, whatever makes sense and gives logic to your administration. Create as many groups as necessary so you can subdivide how you target your systems. So from here, let me move back and I'm going to remove everything once again, and I will create a playbook. Let's say yes, it's just a simple example playbook because we will use the Linux playbook as just as an example, something that we can run. Let me simplify this playbook just a bit. If you notice, is trying to target a group called web servers. Now I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to target the Piggy system. Notice that the become is being passed in the playbook. I'm going to remove some of the tasks so this runs slightly faster. So let me get rid of this, and we don't need to update anything. And let's just install Apache. This is not about what the playbook is doing, it's just about running. Alright, so at this point, if you notice, we have an inventory. So let's take a look at that inventory. In this inventory, we have a file called host. So let's go into the host.yaml. And if you notice, this is following a slightly different standard because it's using a YAML definition. So within the host key, I will set the Piggy system. Let me look at what's the Ansible host for the Piggy system. This is the IP, so I will paste that one. I don't need any of this because we don't have them. If you want to set children groups, you can set them right here. So if you want to make it part of the web servers, I can just do it here and say the Piggy system is part of the web servers, or if it's database servers, same story. Now I don't need any children because I won't be using them, so I'm just gonna simplify things a lot. Now at this point, let's start talking about the next Ansible tool, which is the Ansible playbook. And the Ansible playbook is probably one that everybody is familiar with. It allows you to just run the playbook. And the Ansible playbook takes as parameter the playbook that will be executed, and it also takes parameters, it's not host, it's the, I'm in the wrong directory, Ansible playbook, Linux playbook. The only parameter, it can take parameters like the inventory, and if we want to become, and if we want to set the password, basically the same parameters that we pass with the Ansible tool. Now we don't need to pass those things because these are already set in the Ansible configuration, and we're just going to run the command. I'm unable to reach it. Let's check the inventory. So host.yaml, and let's say Piggy Ansible host. That looks good. I might have another one. The reason is failing is because if I go into the Ansible configuration, the default example is using a remote user, and that remote username is my user, which of course doesn't exist. So let me change that for my own user. The become method still sudo, everything else can stay just the same. Let's try it again. So we run it and still unreachable. Yeah, the reason it's still failing is because on the inventory for that specific host, you can see there is not variables set. So let's look at the groups. Within the groups bars, we can see there is a group which is called all. This affects all the systems, even my piggy system, which I was not expecting. So if I go into the all, it's a default group for all the hosts. You can see here there is also asking for the Ansible username. So let's change that Ansible username for my username, and then it's also asking for the path to my private key. So it's passing that value. Let me get that path. Alright, so paste it there and try one more time. Okay, I think the problem was that I was passing an incorrect IP address. That's why the SSH wasn't working, and now I can test it again, and we can see that it's gathering the facts and it's running the playbook. There is nothing to do because it was already executed, so it should be working. Now, some of the things that I would recommend within your playbooks is always give your task meaningful names, because that task itself becomes your documentation. There is no need to set comments into playbooks. Sometimes they're necessary, but in most cases, just setting a proper name to your task, that's more than enough documentation, because the playbook talks itself. It explains by itself just by looking at the code what it's doing. The other is that break up your playbooks into small components. That will make it easier to manage. And use Ansible modules as much as possible. Try to avoid modules like the command module, the shell module, raw modules. That the only thing that they do is that they execute something directly in the remote system, but they kind of like run and let it be. They will not force or enforce idempotency to be sure that the things are in the way that we are expect them to be. So they will just run something, and a lot of people will use them to execute a script or execute a command, and that's great. Sometimes that's the only option. But if you have a module in a Pythonized, an Ansible way, a native Ansible way, use it. The other is try to establish a standard that your whole team and yourself are using, of how to code, spaces, indentation, variable names. That will keep all the easier to read, easier to maintain, and try to use very descriptive variable names, as many variables as you need. There is no limitation to the size of a variable name as far as I know. So use very descriptive variable names, and if you are working in a role, if you are setting variable names in a role, prefix that variable name with the role name. If the role is called HTTP and the variable is called remote server, the variable should be called http_remote server. That way you always know this is coming from a role. And when you start mixing local variables with role variables with other roles variables, you can very easily identify the origin of that specific variable. Try always to develop your playbooks using the latest Ansible version. You can use older versions, but there is constantly updates and improvements to the code, so it's better to always try to keep your code in the latest and greatest Ansible version. Another tool from the Ansible ecosystem is the Ansible Vault. The Ansible Vault allows you to control secrets. So if you just want to create a secret, you can say Ansible -vault create, and let's create a new file. Let's say secret.yaml, and it's gonna ask you for a password. So let's set a password, confirm that password, and now we are inside of a file that anything that we save within the file. So let's say this is my password, it's equals very secure password, and this is my email, some email, right? As soon as I save this, and I'm not, you will see that this new file called secrets, it's an encrypted file that we will be able to use within our playbook, that we will be able to load in our playbook just as any other regular variable file. The only difference is that when we do the Ansible playbook execution, we will have to ask for the vault password. We have to pass the option ask for the vault password. So we run, it's gonna ask us, and it will decrypt it in the execution. So that brings a little extra security to the way that we are handling secrets. And most importantly, we don't need to keep anything confidential in the open in our Git repositories. If you want to look at your secret, you can just say view secret. It's going to ask you for the password, and it's having an error. Oh, I had a typo. It's not secrets, it's secret, non-plural. And there you go. It's just showing you the information that you have encrypted. The file is still encrypted. It's just showing you on the fly whatever is in it. Now, if we wanted to use this in our playbook, let's use this Linux playbook as an example. We will pass a new variable. Well, actually, this is a file, so it will be a var files, and we will pass the secret.yaml. When we run, we execute, and we pass the option ask for the secret password or the vault password. Now, when we take a look at the Ansible configuration, let's look Ansible CFG, we can see it's all of the things that have been configured. Now, those are not all the options. There is many options that we can use. If we want to list all the possible configurations, we can say another tool from the Ansible repertory. We can see the Ansible config, and it has the option to list, and it will list and explain all the possible options that we have in the system. One thing to know is that there is a lot of information. So if you know you're looking for something specific, maybe you want to change the number of forks that are running, you can always, just like you will do in a manual page or in Vim, you can always do a search. So forward slash, you can see the forward slash at the bottom, and you can search for whatever string that you want. So if I'm looking for forks, you say forks, fork, let's try again, fork, there you go. And it shows you that the option, if you want to configure this using an environment variable, is Ansible-forks. If you want to configure in an INI configuration file, you use the key forks, and it will be inside of the defaults sections. So let's configure that. I'm going to go into the Vim Ansible CFG, and within the defaults sections right here, I will just say forks equals 5. And I have all the different options of configuration right there. Now, looking at those configurations in that very long list is way too much information. So another option that we can use is the Ansible config. Once again, we're going to list, but instead of just putting them all on screen, we will use the -- type, and when you double tap, it shows you the different types of configurations that we can use. The base configurations, if it's something related to connections, to the inventories, to the shell, to the variables, etc., right? So if we want to look at the become options, we can say become, and it will still print, but it doesn't print everything. It just prints the become options, which of course are a lot less options and a lot easier for us to consume. What if instead all we want is to generate a new Ansible configuration file? We can use Ansible config with the option dump. This is gonna dump a configuration file, and we can select the type of configuration file that we want. We can say that JSON file, or maybe a YAML file, or we can say the default, which is a display file that is going to be generated. Now we can always redirect this into the actual file. So let's do Ansible CFG.tmp. It's highly recommended that you don't redirect straight to the Ansible CFG, because if you do, it will automatically start taking those configurations. So ideally you should take it somewhere else or to a temporary file, so you can just go there and make your modifications, your adjustments, and then just change the name. So if we do that, we look at the Ansible.cfg.tmp, and you can see that everything has been configured. Here we just need to come over and remove whatever it is that we consider unnecessary. Now I'm not going to do that right now, so just exit from here. Now that we have a way of running our code, our connection set, we understand that we can use Ansible and we can use Ansible playbooks. We understand that we can configure using the Ansible config. Another very common requirement will be to have collections that we need to use within our playbooks. Some of those collections will have to be installed locally. This is if we are working with just Ansible core. If we are working with execution environments using the Ansible Navigator, then they don't need to be installed locally. Instead, they need to be installed in the execution environment. An execution environment is a container, so they're still local, but not local to us, local to the execution environment. The story doesn't change, it just changed the fact that it's not running in your system, it's running in the container. Now, to know what collections are available, we will use the Ansible Galaxy tool. and we will say from the collection, give me a list, and it will list all the available collections in Ansible Galaxy. It can also look at roles, so I can say roles and list. Now, I don't have a role path configured because it will list all the roles that I have in this location or this location and my default location within my home directory. But if you had any, it will list all those. Now, if you look at the collections, a lot of those collections can be installed in my system. So right now, let's go ahead and install the community crypto. So I will install community crypto, and if you notice, it's unnecessary to have it installed because it's already there. Let's select just another one. Let's just do this one, and it will try to install it. Now again, it's just saying this is already in place and everything is listed here. It's kind of like default in my system. When you do the listing, is giving you two locations. Is saying from this location I was able to find this collection, and if I look in this location, which is kind of like the default from your home directory, I was able to find all of these locations. Now if you wanted to install multiple locations and probably do it often, I will recommend you to do instead a requirements file .yaml. Now, if you just do it that way, you will have to be explicit. If you do a requirements file and you say, I need the collections name community.crypto, and then you start adding more and more collections, right? And different names, different versions, whatever is necessary. Those collections, you will have to be specific and say something like Ansible Galaxy collection install using the requirements.yaml. That is fine, it can be done. But at the same time, if you're running in an execution environment or if you're running in the controller, the ideal is to have a folder called collections. And within the collections directory, you will have the requirements file. So let's move the requirements file in the collections. And if we look at collections, the requirements files is right there. The reason we set it this way, even if you don't have any collections, like literally you just have the directory and the file, the reason I'm doing it that way is if you're running in a controller, the controller will automatically find the file and will automatically process that file and perform those installations at runtime. The other thing to know about collections is that you will basically find three main versions or three main types of collections. One are the certified collections. Those are either created or validated by Red Hat, and those can be found in the Red Hat Automation Hub. You will need an account to get there, but those are certified collections. Highly recommended to use them because they're well tested. There are also the community collections. Community collections, those are going to be found on Ansible Galaxy, and those are created by the community. You will find a lot of great material there, but at the same time you have to be careful because those are not necessarily thoroughly tested, and highly recommended that you always take them down and check them and run them against testing environments before you try something in a production environment. And the last one is your own collections. The collections that you create that you can either publish on Galaxy, or you can publish in your private automation hub, or you can just have in Git repositories. There's different ways of kind of like hosting collections, but at the end of the day, those are yours, those are private, and you define what's on those collections. Now, because there are way too many collections, too many things to know, we need to have documentation about those collections. So the next tool in the Ansible ecosystem is the Ansible doc. This is going to help us look into the documentation of pretty much any role or any collection published out there. If we want to see all the things that are available, just run a list. This will take a few seconds, and now you can see all the available collections that are out there. You don't need to install any of them. If I wanted to, I can of course say Ansible Galaxy collection install and let's pick one of them and just install it. Right now, that might need a little extra something. Yeah, I'm passing the whole module. That's the collection, right? It's already installed. But anyway, if I wanted to look for a specific documentation, I can say Ansible doc, show me the documentation for this specific collection. And it opens the same material that you will find if you go to the Ansible documentation online. You can see all the keys, all the examples, all the different arguments and requirements of that collection can be found here. At the bottom, just like in the website, you can find examples for all of the collections. Now, the next tool in the Ansible ecosystem is the linter. Now, we have the Linux playbook, right? Let me go into the Linux playbook and break some things just to show you how the Ansible ecosystem will complain about some things here. Ansible linter. All the changes that I did will cause the Ansible linter to complain about something. The Ansible linter will make sure that your playbook is ready and sound and perfect, that you follow standard coding, good practices, and the best recommendations for the playbook to function. So the way you run it normally, if you want to run it locally, is just say Ansible linter, and you run it against the playbook that you want to check. Now, if you run it that way, notice that it automatically says there's a few things that need to be corrected. One of them is, for example, if you notice it's saying using Ansible configuration file, the error, neither the collection requirement entry key name or source point to a concrete resolvable collection artifact. Name is not a fully qualified collection name, so it's complaining about the name of the collection. So let's correct that. And if you notice, I changed the name of the collection that we are calling to be just DNF. So let's say this Ansible built-in DNF. That is the fully qualified. We checked again. And now we're still complaining about some of those requirements. But this is actually already checking. If you notice, because we added the requirements that YAML automatically into our collections, the linter is not just checking the playbook, it's also checking the environment around that playbook. And it's saying that requirements YAML is incorrect. So let's check it out, because I leave it incomplete. If you notice, this is collections and it's not getting anywhere. So let's just remove that and see what we got this time. Okay, now we can see, for example, a vars file is not a valid attribute for play. Now that's complaining about the vars file, so let's look at that. And I think this is vars files. I think it's vars files. Let me double check. Okay, we can now see that now it's complaining about the way that I'm passing the variable file. It should not be a list. And now it's complaining about the fact that it's unable to find the secrets, uh, the secret YAML file. So let's just get rid of that because we are not even using it, to pass to this next error. And you can see here now it's saying the YAML truly. Truly value should be either false or true. This is something on line number 4. So let's go look into line number 4, and we can see that I changed this become for a yes, which is a valid. You can say yes or no, but ideally, and the good practice is that this should be true. So we save it, we run it again, and let's see what else is to be complained of. Now the next complaint is there are too many lines at the end. So on line 11, so if we go to line 11, we can see that there is this is just an extra line. We can either remove that line or set 3 dots to close our YAML definition. I like to set the 3 dots so I know the 3 dashes, those are indications of the beginning. The 3 dots, those are indications of the end. So I'm just gonna save it, run it again, and if everything is good, we should get no errors. So now it says pass, and that's good. Now this is a linter, and it links the playbook locally. We can also do it within the execution environments. We can also connect our linter to are pipelined within our Git repositories, either using something like GitHub Actions or something like that. We can set it there, so we can force the members of our organization to make use of linter and to be sure that their playbooks are always perfect, that they are not complaining about anything. Within the options of the Ansible lint, we can see there is an option which is the uppercase L. This is going to list all the different rules in the system. Now notice that there are many rules. If any of those rules is unnecessary for your environment, you can explore it, create a file called Ansible lint, I think it is, .yaml, and within that file you can say the things that are disabled. So you don't need to follow all the rules one by one. You can specify this doesn't make sense, this I don't need, this is unnecessary for my environment, and you can say the ignore rules for your specific linter needs. Now everything I have been showing so far is within your local environment, but what if you are working with execution environments? What if you have an Ansible automation platform and you're working with containers running your execution? The modern workflow will make use of an Ansible Navigator and execution environments. You have to keep in mind that if you're using the Ansible Navigator, it's because you're working with execution environments. It still uses all the core tools that I just showed you. It just does it connecting to this remote or container. Um, this is what wraps all these CLI tools and ensures that all the automation is consistent, because the execution environment will never change. You can have multiple execution environments because they will be different based on your needs, based on the fact that you might be installing collections and roles and scripts and tools and whatever you need. So you might end up having multiple execution environments, but at the end of the day, they are all containers. In these containers, package Ansible core, all of your Python dependencies, all of your system dependencies, all of your collections, all of your roles, and it makes it a very reliable and repeatable environment. So to manage this, we use the Ansible Navigator. The Ansible Navigator has all the tools that we already explored built in. So it's the exact same story. It just gives you, again, the connection to the execution environment. So if you notice, you can handle collections from the execution environments using the Ansible Navigator. You can handle the configuration, documentation. You can execute commands within the execution environment. You can check the images of your execution environments, inventories, the linter. You can replay previous history of previously executed commands, run, check on your settings, and the welcome, which is basically the default. When you do Ansible Navigator on its own, it goes and pulls down the default execution environment from Galaxy. This default community Ansible development tools it holds the basic core of Ansible. Notice that if you are familiar with working with the Vim editor, this is going to be like walk in the park, because it uses a lot of those shortcuts and movements to move around. So if we want to check for the images that we have locally in our system, we could just set the colon at the bottom and type images, hit enter, and it will show you all the different images that I have in my system. Now it shows all the images from all of my projects and things that I've been working around. But if you notice, among the things, it highlights those that are being currently using. It says this is the one that I'm running on right now. Now if you want to look at specifics, notice that there is a column with numbers. You can go to that number. If I want to look at the specific of that one, I will do number 3, and it will show me those specifics. Now you're moving within different panels. Like if I want to look at the Python packages that are installed, I will just do again 3, and it will connect to that specific container, and it will show me all the different Python packages. Now to move back to the previous panel or the previous screen, just hit escape and it will go back. Now I will keep hitting skip till it goes back all the way. So if you wanted to run a playbook, you can just say colon run and run the name of the playbook. So we can say Linux underscore playbook.yaml. It will prepare, it will connect, it will upload the playbook into the execution environment, and it will run. Now you can see that the playbook has been executed, and it shows me the successful message and everything else. And it shows me, let me move my face just slightly up so you can see there is the successful right at the bottom. And if I hit the 0, you can see right there the 2 main tasks that were executed. Let's look at the details of number 1, and everything that just happened is there. Now this is slightly different from running just from the terminal, because on the terminal it just shows everything on the screen. Now let me show you that you can do that as well. So I'm gonna hit escape until I get out, clear my screen, And now I'm going to use, once again, the Ansible Navigator to run the Linux playbook. So I'm passing that command directly from the command line. And it will do the same. It will download the execution environment, it will execute, run, it's all good. I can check the output and everything run just fine. Now, this is tedious because every time that I'm running something, it goes and downloads that execution environment. I don't want that to happen. So let's change that and say --QQ, and here I can say never. That will, if the execution environment exists, it's giving me a little error. The error that I was getting is because I said QQ and the option is PP, which is pull policy. And never basically means never download that image because I know that it's already here. Or we can also use missing instead. So let's do it again, and instead of QQ, let's do PP missing. This is basically going to say pull policy is download that image of the execution environment only if it is missing. So I'm going to hit enter. Notice that it went much faster because it's not downloading anything, and it runs. Now, what if I have multiple images? I can also say use the execution environment image, EEI, execution environment image, and then I will pass the name of the execution environment image. I can list my images with Podman. So let's do EEI, and I'm gonna be using this latest, and it runs just the same. This is just in the case that you have multiple execution environments and you want to be specific selecting one. Now every time you run, it brings the terminal user interface. Sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes all you want to see is your playbook executed, just like in the old-fashioned way. So we're gonna change the mode. We can either do -m or -mode. Let's just do m, and let's do standard output. That will run the playbook, but instead of putting everything on the UI, it will just show the previous normal Ansible way. If I want to make it interactive, that is the same as running the UI. Now, every single time that I have been running this playbook today, if we look at the Ansible Navigator YAML file, we can see that the logs are being sent to the .logs directory with this specific name and timestamp and everything else. So if we do a listing to the .logs, every single time that we have been executing, there is a recording of the actions that just happened. Now, I can of course just go into the .logs and open whatever the file might be. Let's do it this way. 38. Here you go. And just kind of like explore the file as it is. But if you notice, this is a JSON file and it shows all the information in a not so easy to read way. Or I can replay that play by not, that doesn't mean that it will rerun the playbook. It will just re-show that output in the UI. So I can say Ansible Navigator replay the dot logs, and let's say Linux 38. I forgot to put all the rest of that. But if you notice, it's not running, it's just showing what was the last status. And I can go and I can check all the specifics. Now, just like in the regular core tools of Ansible, I can look into the documentation. One tip you should know is that it doesn't matter which screen you are in the Ansible Navigator, you can always go to all the other areas. I'm going to do just :doc, and that's going to take me directly into the documentation. Now it takes me to the documentation of the module that I'm looking at right now. So it's quite intelligent on knowing exactly what is it that you're looking at it, what is it that you need to see. Now if I step out of the tool itself, I can also use the Ansible Navigator doc to look into any documentation. So let's say that I want to look into the Ansible POSIX firewall D. It will, from within the execution environment, open the same documentation of the collection that I need. And again, just like with Ansible doc, it will present all the possibilities right there. Now, Ansible Navigator, just like any other Ansible tool, has a help. It shows you all the options, and if you pick any of the sub commands like run, it also has a help. Now, one thing you should know is that this doesn't display all the possible options, because remember, this is just a wrap on the core tools. So it shows you the things that you can do here on Ansible Navigator, but it also at the bottom tells you, hey, but there is another help, the actual help of the Ansible playbook, right? Instead of Ansible Navigator run, it shows you the help of the Ansible playbook. That is the back end of what the Ansible Navigator is doing. So if I want to look at that, I can say from the run, show me the HP or help dash playbook. And if you notice, this help right here is the same help as the one for Ansible Navigate. Ansible playbook. Just like before, you can use Ansible lint. You don't need to pass anything specific. And let me break a little bit the Linux playbook again. Just a little bit. I'm just going to change one parameter here to say yes. And let's do Ansible Navigator lint. Now notice that this, different from just linting on its own, is linting the whole directory. So it's looking into all the different files within my directory and finding problems within them. You can of course go and fix them one by one, and I can also use the Ansible Navigator to fix my files. So let's look at the last one. If you notice, this is saying the network playbook on line 6. Well, actually, let's look at this one. This is the one that we broke. So let's look at number 2. And if you notice, it's saying, okay, there is error on line number 4. It's a severity measure and it has to be either false or true. Now, just like in BIM, if we do colon help, it's going to show you all the different options of the Ansible Navigator. And I want you to see that there is an option to write and edit a file. We can say on escape, we can say colon O and select this path. It will open it. We can come over here and fix it. And now that is fixed, well, I hit escape, but it will, you don't need to hit escape. It will automatically take you to the previous screen and you should see that error is not longer in the list. So the Ansible Navigator allows you to fix things one by one without leaving the Ansible Navigator itself. Now, the Ansible Navigator, just like Ansible CFG, offers a lot of different configurations, a lot of things that we can change in the way that it works. There is a file called ansible-navigator.yaml, and if you notice, this is the kind of like the default configuration that you will get. Now, there is a lot of things that we can configure, not only on the Ansible Navigator, but also on the Ansible configuration. Now, in the previous when we were looking at Ansible Core, the Ansible config shows you all the options. You can look at the same using the Ansible Navigator by looking at Ansible Navigator config dump in mode interactive. It will open and show you all the different options. Now, in this case, it changes. Let's change it so it's going to the standard output. And notice that all the options are here. Now, the slightly different from before, we can / and look for forks, and it will show you the option and where that is currently configured or coming from, and what is the current value, right? If you remember, we set it up in the Ansible CFG as 5, so it's showing. You can see the things in yellow are coming from your local configuration. The things in green are coming from the global configuration of Ansible. So it's actually telling you where is every single setting coming from. And in some cases, it's just using the default. It's not in any file. It won't be found on any file. It's just telling you, I'm just using the default, the hard-coded value. Another thing that you can do here besides the / it's the F. When you look at it in not standard output, in interactive mode, you can do the :F and do a similar search. Now, what if you use the dump, you're getting exactly what's currently configured. But what if what you want is not what is currently configured, but to see all the possibilities? Then instead you use list instead of dump, and it will print all the options, just like before, all the different options. And just like before, you can select different types and see just specifics. Now, to look at the configuration of the Ansible Navigator itself, you can run Ansible Navigator. I want to see the settings. Here you have two options. You can either get a sample and send the sample to a file. So let's say Ansible navigator.yaml.sample, or you can say, instead of sample, you can say effective. The difference is that the effective one will send exactly the things that are active at the moment. So we send the effective, and if we look at the Ansible Navigator YAML sample, removing the top section, this gives you a sample of all the possible configurations that you can set. It's a lot. Now let's look at the effective one, and again, removing the top, you can see that this shows you what's currently set into our environment. Now when you use the Ansible Navigator collections, it's not going to Galaxy and showing the collections that you have there. Is instead connecting to the execution environment and telling you what collections were found within that container. So this is very useful because sometimes you don't understand why your playbook is not working, and turns out that your playbook needs a collection that is not in the execution environment. So this is going to help you research what's inside of it. Now, if you want to look at the specific of those, you can just click on the number and it's going to show you all the different modules. So let's say that I want to look at number 17. If it was just number 2, I can just say number 2. But because it's number 17, I cannot say 17 because it's typing number 1. It will think that I want to go to number 1. So instead of I have to do colon 17, and it will take me to 17. So whenever there is more than one digit, you will have to use the colon. But it shows you all the documentation and all the information about the collections. Now, if you are working with older versions of playbooks that you want to run them in execution environments, there will be maybe, perhaps, some modifications that are necessary. One of those modifications is the fact that you need to understand that the local host is not longer your local system, but is the local host of the container. And the other is the fact that collections need to be called with a fully qualified name. Now, those can be easily found online. You can always go and Google it. But there is a file in the system called the Ansible built-in runtime.yaml. There should be a copy of it in your home directory. So if we just do find in my home directory file of name Ansible runtime YAML, you can see that there is plenty of them. They're all the same. I'm just going to take the last one in the list just to show you how it looks like. But this is just telling you what you used to call builder, now it's called Container Sportman Builder. And what you used to call, I don't know, let's see, one that is common, Docker perhaps, Docker image, is now the community.docker.docker_image. So it has a very long listing of all names versus new names that it uses for redirections. And that is it. I hope you like the video and you get the time to explore, play around. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and see you the next time.